Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Yes, so I am Emma. Sundance Studio is my little weaving label. And before we start, I just wanted to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners, custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Thank you. So yes, here is my weaving studio. I might connect to my phone as well and go do a little loop around, and it will be a bit easier to show you the finer details of things. So my studio is here on the Mornington Peninsula in Flinders, and I live about 5 metres away from the studio on a little farm. I have some horses here, and it's a pretty idyllic lifestyle. It's pretty nice. Okay. Oh, it's a bit like Inception. Recording in progress. Okay, here we go. It's a bit like Inception with all of these screens, so I'm sorry if it's a bit disturbing. I'll try and figure it out. Okay, let's definitely flip that screen. So here we are. I'll give it a quick little whiz around. I've got both my dogs here with me. We have a little orchard out that door. It's a bit windy here, so I hope that it's not too loud. I have 3 table looms. 2 were gifted to me and another one my grandpa bought for me. And there's my big them in the back. Here is some recent work, a commission and a few other little hanging pieces. Some bags. Some more bags for another shop. My grandpa made me a lot of the things in the studio, including this warping mill, all of the desks, the frames, the bookshelf. I have my little library here and some yarn and all of my supplies. Yeah. Here we go, here's my big jack loom. Here is a bunch of work that I've made for a shop. So some coasters and placemats. Yeah. Here we go. Here's my little bobbin winding station. So I wind all of the yarn onto these things. And here's what I have currently on the loom. It's some little checks, quite earthy ones. Yeah, so they'll be for cushions. And here's the view out the door. Here's my little pile of work to photograph. It's probably one of my less favourite parts of running my own business, the photography, but it has to be done. And here is my little table loom. So it operates by pulling down these levers, which creates a shed, which I pass the yarn through to make some cloth. All right. So I studied textile design at uni and specialised in weaving. And I might jump back down onto the laptop and give you a little presentation about how to warp up, which I think sort of explains the process a bit more, and also, there we go, explains the process a bit more and sort of the value of the materials and how long it all takes and the like. So I'll share my screen now. There we go. Okay, I'll just play this. So here are some of the workings out that I do before I put on any warp. It's quite technical and quite mathematical. You have to figure out, say, for how thick the yarn is, how wide you want the warp to be, how long you want it to be. I weave a lot with linen, which is really beautiful. It's a bit more environmentally friendly than cotton as well, and it just has amazing colours. I also use a bit of wool and some cotton too sometimes, some organic cotton. Unfortunately, I have to import a lot of the yarn that I use. I would love to sort of have more Australian suppliers. If anyone knows some, feel free to message them to me. Unfortunately, the only Australian cotton I know is not coloured, and any wool I know of is more suited to knitting. So I get my linen from Lithuania and my wool from America and the UK. I buy my silk and natural fibres like hemp through suppliers here in Australia, but I think that they come mostly from India and Nepal and those sort of areas too. Yeah, that's the start, and that I'll think about the patterns that I want to put on, what I want to weave, whether that's a hanging, whether that's cloth for bags. And here we go. Here's one of the first steps is winding the warp. So all my yarn, a lot of it comes on cones like that. And I'm winding, I think about 10 meters long here. So this is the warp, the threads that run. Yeah. And then this is the little section where you wind the cross, and that's what tells you which thread comes next in the process of threading it, which will happen soon. But before that, you have to chain the warp. So as you can imagine, all of this thread, all of this yarn can very easily get tangled. And so this is one of my favorite parts actually, is turning it all into one big chain. It's very satisfying. And you tie it all up to just keep it all in order. And this is a natural linen here that I'm using, which I think I wove a few bags out of, a few placemats, a few coasters, which one day I might have online, who knows. Sometimes things can sit in my studio under my big screen printing table for about a year before I like them enough to do something with them. All right, these are just photos. This is just spreading out the warp onto the back beam, getting it ready to wind on. And my loom here looks a bit distorted. I don't know why, it was the angle of the camera, but here I am popping the warp on. So it's all a pretty laborious, time-consuming activity. I've grown to like it through a lot of practice. I've gotten a bit more efficient, but pre-industrialisation, this obviously just took up a huge amount of time in people's lives. Mostly women were often the weavers, and all of the yarn had to be spun by hand pre-industrialisation. And a really big proportion of people's time was spent on this. And then a bigger proportion than now of people's money was also spent on cloth, because it all had to be made by hand. But this part of the process, winding the warp onto the back beam, I'm just getting all the knots out of the thread. Any weavers that are watching might be slightly horrified that I'm warping without tension. Usually you weight down the warp or have someone holding it. But I put so many warps on and they're not that wide really. And so it just seems to go on okay. If you have loose spots in the tension, when you're weaving, you'll notice some issues, but it seems to be okay for me. And so you just put some paper in the back there, and then you continue on winding and getting all the knots out. And you do that for 10 or so meters as you wind. Yeah. And then the next part of the process is threading. So you often have between 100 and 500 or something threads. Obviously it depends on the thickness of the thread, how wide you're weaving, but that's what my range tends to be. And this is the section that probably takes up the most amount of time. So each of those threads has to be threaded through one of those heddles, one of those white strings. And depending on the order that you thread each of those yarns through, you can weave different patterns. Yeah. So it seems somewhat complex, but once you get the hang of it, it's okay. It just takes time. And I think I was just putting a straight draft on. So you can make twills. If you look at your jeans, often they're twills. Yeah, it's like diagonal lines that go up through the cloth. Often jeans are woven, coats are often woven, jersey fabrics are knitted. This is another step. So after you thread, what was that one? You have to then thread each of those threads.
You can do voiceovers with.
Sorry, that's my grandpa. He was videoing for me. God bless Gumpy. So yeah, each of those threads has to then go through the reed, which sort of makes it look a bit more like what you might imagine of a loom. Slowly getting there. Each of those little bundles are knotted. Many, many stages before you even get to the weaving part. Yeah, but it's quite satisfying. Please excuse the crocs. My floors in my studio are concrete, and so it hurts my knees, and I get chilblains in winter because it gets cold as well. Okay, and now we get to almost the weaving section. So I've leashed it onto the stick at the front, and I've woven some scrap fabric just to spread all the yarns out so it's ready to weave. And turn that volume off. Here we go. I think I had quite loose tension to start with, but we get there. Yeah. So once you're weaving, it can be quite quick. It's the process to get to this section that is really time consuming and is why hand weaving doesn't really exist in the Western world as much. Yeah, you might be able to notice it or may not, but my feet are moving up the pedals. I'm weaving like a subtle textural pattern in there. So I'm going all the way up and then I start from the beginning again. And so when I'm ready to advance the cloth, there's a crank at the side there. I crank the beam round, it will move the cloth further towards me and release the warp from the back to go forward. Yeah, so this is a really fun, enjoyable bit of weaving and I really love it. Here we go. And then here's a little video just showing weaving from the back. You can sort of see my feet moving and the shafts which pull the thread up, all going. Yeah, so I'm just weaving with some, oh sorry, my dog's she's in the sun, she's having a sunbake, she made a weird noise. Yeah, I'm weaving with my natural linen here. Yeah. I was lucky enough to, before COVID, to intern with some really amazing weavers. One in Belgium, Esther van Schulenberg, who's so technical, she's amazing, and she's able to design just small samples like this size and then sells those designs to mills over in Europe. But because we don't really have many mills here in Australia, we don't have that long history of weaving really. In this sort of a context. There's Geelong Mill in Geelong and Waverley Mill in Tasmania, but I don't really know of many others. And so, yeah, there's a different sort of setup with selling your designs in Europe. And then I also interned with Rachel Snack of Weaver House, who's in Philadelphia. And she's got a very art-based practice and has a yarn shop and teaches workshops and is amazing. She's really cool. So it's interesting to see how different weavers make it all work. I've got my favourite book here, which I thought I might show you. It's I'll try and stop my screen sharing if I can figure that out. There we go. So yeah, weaving has a really long history in all different parts of the world. People would basket weave. I think the earliest one, I don't know, it's really hard to tell because weaving is often so ephemeral, the materials just disintegrate. But I think they found a basket about 20,000 years ago. and this book is about 70 years old, and it has all these drafts. So this, it's sort of like reading music, but you can read the draft, thread all the threads in a specific order and get these different patterns. And yes, I think this book is about 70 years old. It was gifted to me by a friend and I love it. So this constantly keeps me inspired. This is an amazing resource. Yeah, amazing patterns, quite traditional, but the way you use material and what you turn the fabric into can all lend itself to whatever you want to do. Yeah. So that's sort of a bit about my practice and how I work. I love weaving. I've got a few stockists, some in Sydney and one here in Melbourne. And I've got a little website, but it's a challenge, like trying to figure out how to make weaving into anything commercial because it's such a slow process. And I think cloth has been sort of devalued over time. But that's okay, it's like in some regards as well, because I'm sure that back in the day, if people had to weave, it was probably pretty uninspiring and tedious for some if you didn't really love it. And a lot of women had to weave. It was a really big part of life. Yeah, and it's carried a lot of stories and inspired mythology and the like. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Emma, for showing us around. We do have a couple of questions. But first of all, I was kind of wondering whether you would like to show us in a little bit more detail some of your finished pieces.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
they didn't look as clear on my phone, so I can bring some over and hopefully like they'll be a bit clearer in my laptop. So that's a lovely idea. I'll just grab some. So I'm not very good at sewing. I get my cushion sewn up by a friend, a tailor. So I weave some cloth. So this is like a mohair waffle weave variation. It will be a little cushion. Here is a hanging that I haven't quite sort of finished, but it's got some inlay techniques in there. It's sometimes weaving translates weirdly because it's a bit translucent on camera, but I hope that some of the things come across. I've got a series of these bright blue bags that were really fun to weave. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And here is another piece. Just quite neutral.
Yeah.
And soft and yeah.
And how long does it take you roughly to make? I mean, obviously it's different for every weave.
Yeah.
But something like that one you just showed us with the...
This one would take quite a while because of the way that I'm connecting the threads. It's almost like a bit more of a tapestry technique on the loom. So I think this one maybe took about a day. So like it's not huge amounts of time, but then there's all the setup of that piece as well. But something like a cushion cover, which is about 50 centimeters long, this would take perhaps 45 minutes to an hour to weave. And so if you set up a warp one day, I do it usually over a day and a half because it's quite hard on your body sometimes, then you could weave 6 cushions in a day pretty comfortably. Yeah. And then that fabric just has to be washed, cut up, finished into whatever you want to be, which again, just takes more time, but it's not totally impossible. Like you can be quite efficient once you're on the loom and weaving and you know what you're making. I think just all the experimentation and figuring out some good ideas and executing things from like a sample into a finished piece also takes a lot of time too.
Yeah, cool. And do you usually start from a drawing or something?
Yeah, sketch out a few ideas. And then most of those don't work when I actually try them on the loom. Like it's crazy. But often from doing that, I see what sections of something works and translate that into a new idea. But often like say a piece like this, it's more about picking out a pattern that you want to try and experiment with, and then it's the materials you use that that sort of bring it to life and make it different and make it your own as well.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. And Eli has asked, what do the petals on the loom change in the weaving process? We had a beautiful shot, on a shot, and just, I think your dog also was walking past too when that shot.
So when you're threading, when you saw that section of me threading each of the different heddles, each of those different white stringy bits, they're connected to different shafts, and those shafts are connected to the petals. So say you've threaded up a thread through shaft 2 and 6 and 7, then if you connect shaft 2, 6 and 7 to a petal, it'll lift those threads, and then that's how you create patterns.
Oh, you can go through. It's do you find it, you mentioned similarities between like reading music before. Do you find that it kind of is like playing a musical instrument in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes so much noise as well. I listen to a lot of podcasts when I weave, and sometimes I can't hear them if my phone's like further than this far away from me, but because it's really loud. Yeah.
Thanks for answering that one. And yeah, so Kate has asked, how long does it take to complete a larger weave from start to finish? How large can you go actually? What's the largest?
The largest on my loom that I would be comfortable with is about 80 centimetres. My loom's probably quite a small version of a floor loom. You have different mechanisms when you start weaving on bigger looms, like a flying shuttle, where you can weave up to like probably around 150 centimetres, but on mine 80 centimetres. Like, it depends what you're doing. It really depends on how the materials you use. Like if you use wool, it'll be a lot quicker because it's thicker. If you're using silk, it's a lot slower because it's so fine. It depends on the pattern you use and how much the weft packs down. A large piece can take a day if I know what I'm doing and it goes well, but often it's a bit of a process of experimentation. And so I usually have a warp on the loom, on the big loom, for about a week by the time I finish everything that I need to finish on it.
Yeah. And of course, that's not including the setup and that you were mentioning before too.
Yeah.
So Vida has asked whether your weavings are used for fashion clothing or mostly accessories and furnishings.
Mostly accessories and furnishings. I would be really interested to do some more like wearable pieces. Like I've seen the most stunning coats that are hand woven by a weaver in the UK. They're heavenly, but I haven't been brave enough to commit to weaving the meterage for that. And I also, like, I'm a textile student and we didn't really learn a lot about translating woven things into wearables. And I don't know if the density of the fabric I'm making is really appropriate, and I should investigate it. It's just hard to sort of take out that time and that amount of material for me to make something for myself. But I'll get there one day. Yeah.
When you say the meterage for a coat, for example, how much would you need?
My good friend Billy Jo Fuchs just wove meterage for her coat. And I think it ended up being about 3 meters. I don't know how wide it was. I think it was wider than what I can weave on my loom because she's got a bigger loom. But yeah, probably between 3 to 5 meters may be appropriate. I don't actually know. You'd have to like look at the pattern that you want to use and sort of figure it out from there.
Yeah, and have a bit of like wriggle room.
Yeah, because it's amazing how much cloth shrinks after you take it off the loom because it's been under tension for all of the weaving. And so when you take it off, it can just shrink up a lot more than you expect, as I've found many a time.
Oh yeah. See, I wouldn't have even, really thought about that. I guess in a similar way to ceramicists after firing clay, that shrinks. So it's like taking it off. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And okay, Vida has another question. They are very beautiful weaves, very earthy colors. Any more vibrant hues in your repertoire?
Yes, I've got one sec, a strap here. I've just been weaving some bags with yellow and white that have had a nice reception. And that's with this like glorious yellow. And I've dyed yarn with turmeric before, which creates a really bright yellow, which is fun. But I'm a bit of a sook with colour. I spend a lot of time thinking about it and not a lot of time using it. But it's something that I'm working on because I don't want everything of mine to be beige. Yeah.
Yeah, although beige is really beautiful, you sort of focus down onto the more intricate and details of things sometimes. Yeah. And we've got we've got 3 more questions which I'll ask, and then we'll wrap up. So how did you get into weaving?
I got into it at university. I went and I studied textile design because I'd done a weekend screen printing course. And I really liked that. And it seemed really hands-on in a way that graphic design wasn't when I was thinking about what I wanted to do. And so I went into textile design and I had no idea what weaving was at all. But we specialise in printing, knitting or weaving there. And I ended up specialising in weaving. And I was the only one in my year level by 3rd year. There were a few more in the year below me, which was nice, but it's not a clear career path, that's for sure. Yeah. Wow. Like knitting is a lot more appropriate for fashion. And so there seems like more opportunities in that. And screen printing's the biggest one of them all. Yeah.
Where was that? Where did you?
I studied at RMIT in Brunswick in Melbourne. But I think they might have changed the course now. So there's even less weaving, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. So Kate has another question. What's your favorite piece that you've made?
Oh, I don't know if you can see it. I've got I'll take my laptop over. I've got these 2 pieces over here which I quite like. I've got one that hangs up there. I figured out a way of having the openings because it's a double weave. I'll show you a better example. I really like this piece as well. That was hard. It required a lot of undoing on the loom to get a shape that I liked, that felt right. But yeah, so you can see the openings in there, I think, of the double weave.
Yeah, wow.
I like those ones. They're fun, they're nice. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And just a quick question from Carolyn. When you say 80 centimeters, is that the width of your loom? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I probably have confused everyone about weaving with all of my explanations.
Not at all.
Yeah, that's the width. So like a lot of the sort of smaller hangings I make might be 25 centimeters wide, and they're up to 80 centimeters. And then the length of weaving, the length of the warp is often between 3 meters and 10 meters long.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Good.
So you can get, like, if a cushion covers 50 centimeters, you might weave 62 or something for shrinkage, but that means you can get out of a 10-meter warp, I don't know the maths, 18 probably about, or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, good eye. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Emma, for showing us around your studio and a little bit into your practice, and those footage of you working was really great to see. And yeah, just want to also say thank you to everyone for joining us today for these 4 studio sessions, virtual open studio. This is part of Craft Contemporary, so